February 27th, 2012. The day of what may very well be the most notorious Daytona 500 of all time. A lot of people probably couldn't tell you that the race was rain delayed for nearly 2 whole days, or even who ended up winning the race, but almost everyone who tuned in that night remembers the 1 in a million chance of Montoya crashing into that jet dryer, because they knew that they had just witnessed something that will likely never be recreated. There are certain moments in NASCAR history where time just stops and everyone remembers where they were. So excluding any major deaths or career-ending injuries, just to keep the tone of the video a little bit lighter, let's discuss some of the rarest moments in NASCAR history. One such recent moment that stands out for myself and many others is the aftermath of the 2022 M&M's Fan Appreciation 400 at Pocono Raceway. Under normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't have even remembered watching this race. It was kinda your typical Pocono snoozer, minus the built-in rain delay, and when Denny Hamlin took the checkered flag at the end of the day, it was quite literally the most expected result. That is at least until a few short hours later, when NASCAR announced that both of the top 2 finishers, Hamlin and Kyle Busch, had been disqualified for failing post-race inspection. This was not only the first outright disqualification of the next-gen era, but also the first time that a driver had a win taken away since 1960, a streak of 62 years. Beyond that, it was the first instance of both the top 2 finishers being disqualified since 1955. That's older than Mark Martin! But perhaps even more shocking than that was what happened this last season in Chicago, when Australian supercars driver Shane Van Gisbergen became the first driver in NASCAR's modern era to win a race in their first ever start. Overall, across NASCAR's entire history, he was only the 7th to ever do it, and the first since Johnny Rutherford in 1963. Honestly, the amount of stats behind this win is incredible. First ever debut win in the modern era, first road course ringer win since 1973, first win by a New Zealand native, and after scoring another top 10 at Indianapolis that summer, he became the first driver since Terry Labonte in 1978 to start a career with 2 top 10s. Odds are we'll probably never see another debut win in our lifetimes. Unless SVG just brings his entire fleet of supercar driver friends over for another rain-soaked road course race, which honestly looks like it'll probably happen sooner rather than later. But still, without a doubt, this has to be one of the rarest occurrences in NASCAR history. It's tough enough to make history once in NASCAR, but what about twice? Especially when the circumstances involve 2 1 in a million types of crashes at the exact same speedway at nearly the exact same spot. And who did this, you ask? Well, it's not Jeff Gordon or Dale Jr. or any other obvious answer. It's Clint Bowyer. Clint pretty much set the unofficial record for the coolest way to finish a race in the 2007 Daytona 500, coming home with a top 20 finish while simultaneously being upside down and on fire. Actually, this just sounds like an average weekend on the farm for Clint, so maybe it isn't so rare. Okay, but what makes this crazier is how Clint almost did it again in the 2014 duel at Daytona. Once again, coming to the checkered flag, Clint would be flipped over as he headed for the infield. But this time, Clint would unintentionally pull off a maneuver that nobody has ever replicated. A perfect 360 in the air, landing on his wheels and driving across the finish line with the car still looking relatively clean. This may already be one of the rarest types of flips in NASCAR history, but for the same guy to flip in the same spot on the same track in a span of only 7 years is borderline ludicrous. This may not be a statistic that gets Clint Bowyer into the Hall of Fame, but it certainly keeps him in the forefront of our minds. While Clint Bowyer's flip at Daytona was considered extremely lucky though, is it the luckiest that any driver has been in one race? Well, if you're averaging the whole thing, then probably not. While getting one lucky dog, or free pass to get a lap back, isn't actually considered all that lucky, one driver has set the bar so high that there's no way to not consider him lucky. Jamie McMurray holds the record with 6 lucky dogs in one race, coming at Talladega in 2014. And fittingly enough, the race was sponsored by Aaron's, who also happened to be the former sponsor of the lucky dog. The only issue is that Jamie's car was so heavily damaged from an early crash that despite his 6 lucky dogs, he still finished 1 lap down in 29th place. But across 20 seasons with the free pass rule being in effect, only 4 drivers have ever even reached 5 lucky dogs in one race, and less than 20 drivers have ever gotten more than 3 in one sitting. And usually this can only happen at super speedways or road courses where drivers infrequently drop off the lead lap. So the odds of us ever seeing 6 free passes in one race ever again are slim to none. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this video, then be sure to subscribe. Most of our viewers aren't subscribed, and it would really mean a lot if you just took a couple seconds to help grow our channel. Another chance that's slim to none is a fan changing the outcome of a race. For the most part, NASCAR does their due diligence to keep outside interferences to a minimum. Despite those procedures, there have been quite a few instances of fans affecting races, though. Like the Richmond fence sitter in 2014, or a rogue beer can causing a caution that allowed Jamie McMurray to win the 2010 Fall Charlotte race. Wow, maybe Jamie McMurray is one of the luckiest drivers in NASCAR. But perhaps the biggest instance of a fan directly affecting one driver's race would have to be when the infamous shoe ruined Danica Patrick's best race ever. Well, at least that's how most fans would perceive it. Unfortunately, the truth isn't nearly as exciting. Danica was in the middle of her best run yet in the Nationwide Series, leading the early part of the Montreal race, when she just so happened to hit a shoe that a fan had thrown in front of her path. Only 3 laps later, Danica had to pit to fix mechanical issues. Most people watching had assumed that the rogue shoe thrower was responsible for this. But according to crew chief Tony Erie Jr., Danica's power steering failure had already begun a few laps before coming into contact with the shoe. But oh well, good storyline aside, how many times does an object flung from the stands actually come into contact with the leader of the race? The only other time I can think of would be when Kyle Busch's car was damaged by a snap TV camera wire at the Coke 600. But that was Fox's doing, not a random fan. This incident would actually lead to NASCAR banning Fox's moving sky camera, which I would say certainly qualifies it as one of the more rare and bizarre incidents in NASCAR history. Something else that's a bit of a rarity in NASCAR is photo finishes. Maybe only once or twice a year do we have one where the drivers are mere inches apart competing for a win. Of all the photo finishes, people love to talk about the Kurt Busch and Ricky Craven finish at Darlington and how exciting it is, and how it's the closest finish in NASCAR history. Which is great and all, except it isn't. A lot of people don't know this because, to my knowledge, it was never mentioned on the broadcast when it happened. And it was also an Xfinity race, which naturally gets way less attention than Cup. But across all 3 series, this is the only finish to be closer than 1/1000th of a second. Holding the record for closest NASCAR finish at 4/10,000ths of a second is Tyler Reddick's Daytona Xfinity win over Elliott Sadler in 2018. From the research that I have done, this might not just be the closest finish in NASCAR history, but the closest finish in all of motorsports. And nobody talks about it! I mean, seriously, ask anyone who won the closest race in the history of all of motorsports. I guarantee you literally nobody is responding with Tyler Reddick. As if a finish this close wasn't rare enough, it's almost rarer to find anyone who actually knows about it. Saving one of the most obvious moments for last, you knew that we couldn't go this whole video without talking about the Hail Melon. For decades, the mythical wall ride is something that most drivers and fans could only dream of. Drivers like Carl Edwards and Kyle Larson had attempted the maneuver in the past, but to no avail. Even in video games, it only works on very rare occasions. But 2 points shy of making the championship round and with nothing to lose going into the final corner at Martinsville, Ross Chastain pulled what can only be described as the single greatest checkers or wreckers moment in the sport's history. Using the ridiculous durability and 5-speed transmission system of the next-gen car to his advantage, Ross sailed it off into the corner and turned the fastest lap ever recorded at Martinsville Speedway. What truly makes this the rarest moment in NASCAR history isn't just the fact that it was done once, but the fact that it can never happen again, as NASCAR wisely banned any future wall ride techniques due to safety concerns. Can't say I blame them, because otherwise you'd probably have 7 cars going full send in the last lap trying to make the championship 4, and that's probably where things would have gotten a lot messier. But even before the ban, most professionals agreed that this was a perfect storm of events. It could only happen with the next-gen car, only at Martinsville, and only with somebody crazy enough to do anything to advance to the championship. And always and forever, this will be the only Hail Melon. But that's just a few of the rarest moments in NASCAR history. Let me know if you can think of any others in the comments down below. But don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and check out dailydownforce.com for more awesome NASCAR content.